there is a lot of hype or whatever it is in the world. I quite agree. Um, it's hit the headlines, and there've been a lot of really influential people who've made some pretty strong statements about this. And one of the interesting ones I think that was up last week was, or maybe last month, was Masayoshi Son, who's the CEO of SoftBank, and he released his 2030 AI predictions, and they were quite interesting. So there were four of them. It was that AI will run every industry. Uh, AI will generate 5 trillion in economic value annually, which is a staggeringly big number. It's about 5% of world GDP. And actually, in my view, that's a conservative number. Why am I making such a bold statement? It's conservative because most of the world's GDP takes place in office buildings and in white-collar work. And that's really where AI is going to leverage us enormously. And I've already personally found that AI has probably improved my productivity 10 or 20% already on the current base of technology. And yes, I'm a slightly early adopter, but that's going to permeate the rest of the world, and the AI is going to get better. So that 5% number, or 5 trillion number, is, I think, actually conservative and not hype. Um, but he made two other predictions, which will be that robots will outnumber humans and they will do most of physical labor, which is very interesting. And you've probably seen Optimus and Figure. They're doing some basic tasks pretty well right now. And the last one is that, and this is going to be very controversial to many of us, chips will surpass human intelligence and they'll redefine decision making. Now that's interesting. And is that hype or is that real? Now, I guess, okay, before we go on to is it really hype or not, there are a few other people that I want to mention as well. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he said the field is more wide open than at any time he's seen since 2000. And he's been the president of Y Combinator, so he's really at the nexus of generating new business opportunities. He said the 2025 will be the year of agents, and he's also said we know how to do AGI, artificial general intelligence. And he's not known for wildly outlandish statements that are not going to materialize at some point. So I think that's probably based in truth. I don't think he's just talking his book. And then the last person who's not talking but doing is Elon Musk. Of course, we all know he built a data center in Memphis. He converted an Electrolux factory in 1 year to be the biggest and best AI model, which is Grok 3, which was released 2 weeks ago. And he's gone from a standing start to being the best AI model that's been released. He's beaten OpenAI, who's been around for about 10 years. And he built this data center with about 234 million megawatts of electrical capacity. They used a third of the cooling systems in the entire United States to cool their GPUs. It's really a gargantuan AI training facility. And he's going to continue to exploit that and make his models better every year. So he's betting it's this enormous amount of investment that AI is going to continue to improve because he's going to reuse this training center again and again. And I mean, personally, I wouldn't bet against Elon. He's, if we're going to be designing our strategy, let's rather design a strategy which aligns with his view of the world, because it's been pretty accurate so far. So I think, in that terms, I think that it's not hype. But actually, let's dive into some data. We all need to base more of our decisions on data than on emotions, than on gut feel. And to that end, I'm actually going to show you a slightly intimidating graph, which I have here, and I'm going to talk you through it because it's not as bad as it looks at first sight. This is a graph which shows how AIs of various types have improved over time. And you can see that they've nicely formatted this graph so that the 0 level near the top is the human performance at the current levels. And each of those lines is a specific task where AIs have been benchmarked to see how well they are doing. And on the far left-hand side, you'll see something which is the handwriting recognition. The axis is a little hard to read, which started in 1998. And that's recent, like about 10 years ago, become better than humans. And then there are other things like reading comprehension, which has also now become better than humans, and image recognition, which is better than humans, and. So, I mean, you get the point. Everything is trending towards being better than humans. And this is the interesting thing. Look at the slope of those lines. They started out like this, and they're now just nearly vertical. And there are a few at the end of the graph in 2023. This is a slightly old graph, which says they're not quite better than humans yet. In fact, they're only, for complex reasoning, about half as good as humans. But since then, they've become better than humans at MLQE, the medical licensing qualifying exam, at legal entrance exams, at maths Olympiad questions, where they are now reaching 53%, which is kind of staggering when you ask a senior mathematician about that. So the trend in the data has shown that every time we have a benchmark, the AIs have beaten it. And if they haven't beaten it yet, it's just because we haven't given them enough time. So I think this data shows very clearly that we're going to be better than that. AIs are going to be better than people.
Or we need to set higher benchmarks, I think.
In fact, that's a very common problem. I'm glad you brought that up in the industry because it's known as benchmark saturation. And as soon as we're getting 95 or 99% repeatedly on every single model, then that benchmark loses its signal. And you have to design a better benchmark, which is much harder, which kind of hones in on where those AIs can differentiate themselves and how they're better than people. So I mean, that's from like a data perspective. From an anecdotal perspective, you hear the same story. So one of the stories is from a very well-respected professor called Ethan Mollick, who's at Wharton, and he's a professor of AI and entrepreneurship. And I'm just going to read you a quote that he put out on Twitter last week. He said, "There's an interesting data point on OpenAI's deep research, one of their most recent models. I've been getting a steady stream of messages from very senior people in a variety of fields who have been unsolicited, sharing their chats and how much it is going to change their jobs. This has never happened with other AI products." And I found the same thing. Last week, I asked GPT-01 Pro to write me a client pitch brief. And it took 10 minutes, researched 70 different sources, and wrote a 5,000-word essay on pitching to a healthcare provider the benefits of using conversational AI. And it was well cited. It was targeted. It analyzed the CEO, their roles, their personalities, their interests. It did a better job. It did a better job than me. and it would have taken me a day, maybe 2 days, a bit of like a day, kind of that order, to do that kind of piece of research. And it did it in 20 minutes. Maybe it was 10 minutes. And yes, it was expensive. It cost £200 for the monthly subscription. But I think in that one piece of research, it actually kind of paid for itself. So, all of the pointers, like whether they are the statements of these fairly credible people, or the data, or the anecdotes, are all pointing towards the fact that this is in fact not hype. And it's hard to tell, like at the beginning, it's hard to tell a fad from hype, a fad from a trend. In this case, I think we've got the data to show that this is not a fad. This is a trend.
And I think we're seeing that in sort of the typical research organizations and the consulting groups like Gartner and others, that the typical hype cycle has kind of shown these things progressing, and peak of expectations, etc., all coming around to starting to move towards the real implementation. So if the hype is not hype and there's real value in this, Stephen, is there a use case that you can share? And of course, we have one in mind, where you go, look, this is how it's really being applied, and the type of value that's coming out from applying AI technologies within a business context?
So identifying those use cases is a really interesting question, because you have to intersect two different worlds. You have to intersect what is the current IT or AI capability with what are the pain points and the needs in the organizations. And those problem sets, or that knowledge sets, typically live in different people's heads. And so bringing those together is a challenge. But we went through some of these iterations. We're kind of adjacent to the screening world, where we see a lot of people don't attend their breast cancer screenings, or their cancer screenings in general, or their health screenings in general, for that matter. And we have some colleagues and advisors and assistants that work kind of in that world. And the intersection for us was conversational AI, because there is an enormous pain point in conversational AI. And there's enormous ability to deliver. So this was our low-hanging fruit. So